stream, and while we're down here, the driver's somewhere up there, cocooned in his cab. The railway saw it coming and were soon appealing to our common sense to tempt us back. On the whole, we took no notice. Well, we remained nostalgic about steam trains because once every little boy, and no doubt lots of little girls, wanted to be an engine driver. But it was all too late.
The steam engine would only perform as well as the crew who were on it. And if you had a driver or a fireman who were prepared to put the effort into the job, then that engine wouldn't perform. I mean, it all started with a heap of coal and a shovel.
This looked like a road map, but it showed the network of railroads before so many were axed in the 1960s. This line joined two Bs, Bath and Bournemouth, with a little branch line to a third B, Burnham-on-Sea, change at Evercreech Junction. The independent Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway was important because it connected the industrial Midlands and the Northwest with the South Coast. But it always felt like a local family enterprise, and in that intimate atmosphere lay the seeds of its own destruction. Some unkindly called the S&D the slow and dirty. It was slow, forever switching back and forth between double and single lines. And it was dirty, steam-powered to the very end. But it took you to the seaside. Its grandest train was the Pines Express. The men who coaxed those steam engines up the steep gradients and over the Mendip Hills were the kings of their iron roads and of a closed world, the locomotive footplate. This film is about two of them, and it's also, therefore, about all of them. Their locomotives may have appeared dumb iron monsters, but to the railwaymen, they were living creatures, and in the hands of an expert driver like Donald Beale, a bulldog could become a greyhound. Teamed up with his young fireman, Peter Smith, and a good locomotive, he was the master of his craft.
You had your faith in the engine. I often spoke to them when I was going along, you know. I know the old girl would do it. She'd do it. Talk to her, come on, old girl, and although it was a bit dicey at times, we used to get through with it. We used to look forward to going to work. Each turn was different. We never had two trips the same.
The footplate men of the S&D were the legendary heroes of the train spotters, people like Mike Arlett. Today, he's laid on a reunion, courtesy of the Midhants Railway Preservation Society. Donald Beale, Peter Smith, and the Pines Express working together again. But the harsh reality of the footplate can never be recaptured. Physically hard and often downright dangerous.
Whenever we went in the tunnel, your handkerchief went into a bucket of water. You had it over your mouth to keep as much cold air as you could.
And I was on the floor already.
He was on the floor already, and when she slipped, I tried to shut the regulator, but she started priming at the same time. Now you can imagine that, working full out, the blast from the exhaust hitting the roof of the tunnel about 12 inches above, and the exhaust fumes from the whole of that firebox of an incandescent fire. You could feel the heat tingling your skins, and when you breathed, it was like swallowing, as Pete said, hot pokers.
And of course, when she slipped, it wasn't in half-hearted fashion.
All you could see outside of the cab was a falling red-hot cinders.
It was raining down over the engine. It was fantastic. Dante's Inferno. And just to finish finally, when we got to Midford, where we had to stop to release the brakes on the train, which was my job, but of course the firebox was virtually empty then, because all this lot had been cascaded out of the chimney, you see, back in...
So you had to start all over again, did you?
Well, actually, again, Donald came to my rescue. While I went back to release the brakes, Donald was there, you know, filling up the firebox again. I mean, because both of us were, you know, in quite a poor state. We were wheezing dreadfully, you know, with the fumes on our chest.
These days, we can all get much closer to the stars of steam, like this massive rebuilt West Country class Pacific locomotive. And the crew are more approachable too.
Could you sign the book for me, please, Peter?
Yes, certainly.
The interest in railways seems to be as intense now as ever it was. I mean, the Preservation Society's keeping the steam engine alive. It's a thing that could go on forever. When I joined the railway, I knew what I was in for. I knew I had to work every holiday. I knew I had to work nights, early mornings. I thought, well, that's it. I'll accept it. So I started August Bank Holiday 1919. I never had no inclination much before then for being a railwayman. But once you got into the shed, and the smell of the steam, smoke, paraffin, it sort of got into you. And then with the talking in the mess rooms and watching the other drivers and firemen doing their work, you gradually began to get that ambition that one day I wanted to be a driver. When you were running along, you knew you were in charge of the whole job. And if you had a good fireman, like I was fortunate to have with Peter in later years, it was a pleasure to come to work. You had to have your eyes outside, and your nose was constantly set the smell of a hot big end. Your ears would catch perhaps a squeak, something's dry out there, or perhaps a psst of a piston gland beginning to blow. All your senses were keyed up as you went along, even your feet. If you went over a rail joint and it dipped a little bit, your interest was sustained all the time. Yeah, I remember working excursion to Bournemouth. And I thought to myself, oh, what a lovely job this is. I'm going down to the Bournemouth and I'm getting paid for it going down there. Oh, it was a dirty job, and you were black with the soot and then the cold would stick. But it was all in the job. We never took a lot of notice of it.
Does it feel the same or different?
Just the same as ever.
Yeah. Can you imagine yourself somewhere between Bournemouth and Bath now?
Yes, and I wish I was doing the whole trip.
You wish you were?
Yeah, you feel the motion through the floorboards the same.
And what sort of things will you be looking out for now, Donald?
Anything out the normal. You look out to see that your line's clear. You look for children or obstacles on the track. You've got to get the train into the destination on time and the passengers walking safely away. Yeah. That's all our job is.
And what about when you got to a steep bank? How did you manage to maintain speed? What did you have to do?
Well, that was Peter's job. We work as a team.
Yes.
I use the steam that Peter creates with good firing. A good fireman, he never wastes coal. He doesn't waste steam blowing off at the safety valve. He gets the steam pressure right up to the red mark, and I use it as economically as I can. When I get to a steep bank, I drop the gear down and open the regulator a bit more, to supply more steam to the pistons.
And were these good engines to work on, these Bully Pacifics? Did you like them?
I like the original West Country best. West Country's was the female of the species. She had a nice green dress on and she was light and dancing on her feet, and If you spoke to a 9, you got a ruff, ruff. But if you spoke to a West Country, Jefferty, 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 that's all she whispered to you. She never had a real bark on her. Put her up in society on first-class coaches or passenger train, and she was in her element, but she didn't like getting her hands dirty on coal trains or anything like that. No, she was a lady of the locomotives.
If the West Country class was a lady, the Class 9F was a bruiser, designed to take steam into the 80s, built for freight and fast enough for the Pines Express, ironing out the Mendip gradients without the need for doubling up. It's 2,000 horsepower, enough to make a fleet of today's motorway juggernauts redundant. Perhaps the roads were not going to have it all their own way after all. On the Somerset and Dorset, they saw the 9Fs as their saviour. But even the 9Fs couldn't save the line. Government policy was one juggernaut that couldn't be stopped. This was Evercreech Junction. Today, the pace of change has overtaken it, and Evercreech has lost its junction. The station master's house was sold, and the old track bed, which Donald Beale travelled for over 40 years, lies somewhere under the front lawn. It wasn't simply that, for the accountants, double-heading the locomotives on the Somerset and Dorset was inefficient. Jointly run by the Southern and LMS, it was always a smut in the eye of the mighty Great Western Railway. When its successor, British Rail's Western Region, got control of the S&D, closure was inevitable. By 1966, it was gone. Exactly 20 years later, Mike Arlett and Peter Smith set out to walk its southern section. It was like looking for a grave in a deserted churchyard, and half expecting to see a ghost. This signal box governed the web of lines at Temple Combe, which was the junction of the Southern Railway's line to Waterloo and the Somerset and Dorset. It could be a shunter's nightmare here, and passengers needed the patience of Job. But the civil servants had none to spare. Today, there's hardly a trace of Temple Combe Junction to be seen. The old Slow and Dirty wasn't just closed. Within months, it was systematically wiped off the face of the landscape. But it was only part of a nationwide orgy of destruction. 5,000 miles of track ripped up and thrown on the scrap heap. Now only the Southern Line survives here, but through this arch you could once enjoy a view of rural England as the S&D took you to the seaside.
No, there was scenery from Sturminster Newton down over the River Stour. And in the summer, the boats paddling up and down the river, a lovely scene. In fact, the whole line was all countryside. We never ran through a built-up town at all.
Will be a stopping train to Bournemouth calling at Penn Street, Stourbridge, Sturminster Newton, Shillingstone, Blandford,
Wincanton, Temple Combe, Sturminster Newton, Stourbridge, Shillingstone, to Blandford. Yes, it was a marvellous scenic railway.
The only sizable town on the route was Blandford Forum, busy Blandford, now off the railway map. Little boys will soon be saying to their fathers, "What's that, Dad? Was it a castle or a church or something?"